Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our From Hurt to Healing webinar, Growing Emotional Understanding About the World Around Us, a parent series on preparing children and students to return to school. If you can turn to the next slide, please. Thank you.
Yep, sorry, Jen, it's taken a second to load.
No problem. We'd like to begin tonight with a quote from Eric Lawson. He says, "At the core of healing, presence is the ability to respond rather than react to the emotions of others." As you can see, we have a team that has been working on this webinar, planning all of the activities that you will experience tonight. You may see some names that are very familiar to you, but as you can also see, there's representation from all facets of our learning process from elementary, middle school, and high school. Our purpose for the event is to provide families with information that will help prepare their children for the return to school. I'd like to turn our activities over now to Dr. Stephanie Griffin.
Good evening. We have a word from our great neighbor about community responsibility. We live in a world in which we need to share responsibility. It's easy to say, it's not my child, not my community, not my world, not my problem. Then there are those who see the need and respond. I consider those people my heroes. That's a quote by Fred Rogers. So when we think about community, we know it's a group of people with common interests and values in protecting the students while providing them with multiple methods to participate in their education, whether face-to-face and or online. Our community responsibility asks that we include cooperation, respect, and participation. But the concept goes beyond thinking and acting as individuals. So we're asking that in order to ensure the safety of everyone in our buildings and our community, that you take proper precautions like wearing your mask, washing your hands, staying home if you're sick, and physically distancing yourself.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Becky Heitch, and I am the restorative practice coach for West Bloomfield. And we wanted to show a short clip, it's 4 minutes long, about how kids are explaining the coronavirus. We thought that was a appropriate lead in, hearing from some of those very intelligent kids about their perception of the coronavirus and things that they're hearing at home, maybe hearing on the news. I happened to ask our daughters a couple weeks ago, before I knew that our home district was going to be online. And my kids have not asked many questions. They don't seem to be all that worried, but I said, hey, what are you really excited about to go back to school? And both of them said to see their friends. And I said, is there anything you're worried about? And I assumed it might be something about, maybe something social or something academic. And our 10-year-old said, I'm just really worried about getting sick, like either coronavirus or flu. And if I hadn't asked that question, I didn't know that my kids had any sort of worry about going back to school and being sick. So part of this evening is really giving parents the information and tools to have those conversations with kids before we go back to school. We want to share with you a little bit about what the schools will look like, how they'll be a little bit different, and how we're taking every precaution necessary to make sure that our students and staff are safe, as well as kind of some social aspects of what school might look like when kids return, about physical distancing, and looking at student mental health and also parent mental health. So our panelists tonight, we have a big group, and we're so fortunate to have them. These people have been working around the clock. Mr. Pace says he's been in his office for about 12 and a half hours now. So we really thank everyone for taking time away from their dinner table or their walks at night or their families to be with us. So we have Kyle Anderson, who's the Assistant Superintendent for Business and Operations, Nikki Horn, who's our school psychologist at Doherty, Gretschko, and Lakers Online. Amy Hughes is the principal of West Bloomfield Middle School. Scott Long is the principal of Doherty Elementary. Eric Pace is the principal at West Bloomfield High School. Diane Swadish is the Student Support Services Director. Lynn Swearhone is our school mental health specialist. She'll be based at the high school this year. Claudia Rogers is our social worker from Scotch Elementary, and Coach Joe, who just gave us all a pep talk, probably one of the most positive people we know, Joanne Vejanovich, counselor at West Bloomfield High School, is here to talk with us as well. So thank you again for being here. Mr. Anderson, we'd like to start with you, and we'd like to, if you could share with parents, how will going back to school work? What will it look like? And what can parents share with students to let them know what's being done for their safety in schools? Things like, routines, ventilation, sanitation. I've heard that there's going to be some sanitation stations within the building. So could you share a little bit with us what that might look like?
Yes, thank you, Becky. First of all, and thank you for allowing me to be a part of this group. This is awesome, and good evening, parents and families out there. My name is Kyle Anderson, and I'm the Assistant Sup for Business and Operations. And really the operations is the transportation, the food service, and the custodial maintenance piece of the school district. So, we have been working very hard to ensure that going back to school, all of our students and staff will be safe. So I'd like to talk a little bit about some of those things that we've put in place this year. I'm a parent, so I was trying to think about forming my little talk about, parents and how they can kind of talk to their students about the things that are in place so they feel more comfortable coming back to school. So at first, I want to talk about some of the cleaning and really disinfecting that we'll be doing. And there is a difference really between sanitizing a surface and disinfecting a surface. When you sanitize a surface, you really limit, the microbes, the germs, the viruses on the surface. But when you disinfect a surface, you actually kill the viruses and the microbes and the bad germs. So that's a very important distinction. And that is our goal, to make things safe. So one of the things, as you know, we have about 90 minutes between the AM and PM cohorts. So we will be performing this disinfecting procedure between the two cohorts and again in the evening. So the goal is when a new cohort of students arrives in that instructional space, that will have been completely disinfected. So that's a very important part of our plan. We are also having barriers provided to all of our teachers. So a teacher will have, and this will look different in a classroom, a teacher will have a barrier that allows her to work in small groups. It's basically a plexiglass cross, and the teacher can set it up at a station and work in small groups, but also have one that's a single person barrier that maybe this teacher would want some one-on-one instruction or work with a student. So we will have that in place in all of our classrooms. We've worked very hard with our mechanical engineers to kind of tweak our heating, ventilation, and air conditioning systems. So one of the things we're doing is doubling the fresh airflow into our spaces. We are, I guess, increasing the quality of our filters. We're going with a filter that has a MERV rating of 13. It's the highest we can do with our equipment. And that's going to help filter out some of the germs. And we're also changing those filters more often. Normally, those filters are changed every 3 months, and we're going to do it every 6 weeks. So that's another important part to our plan. I want to talk a little bit about school buses. So for the parents out there who did choose to be a part of our opt-in for transportation, the school bus experience will look slightly different. We will have a hand sanitizing station when students enter the bus, and they will be asked to sanitize their hands. A mask is required to be worn while on a school bus. And we're finishing up routing today and tomorrow, and our average number of students on a bus is right around 22. So a school bus normally can take 60 or 50 students in one route, but we're going to limit that to about one per seat. So we have that physical distancing on a school bus. So that is very important also. As I mentioned, we're finishing up routing, and we hope to have specific bus stop information to parents Friday, Monday at the latest. So look for that information. I mentioned hand sanitizer. So not only on a school bus, but you will see hand sanitizing stations in all of our buildings. In fact, every classroom, and I'm sorry I have a prop here, but have a jug of hand sanitizer. Each classroom will have a number of these in their classrooms. And I know part of the curriculum this year will be to teach students how to properly wash their hands. The disinfectants that we're using are all EPA approved, and they're designed to kill the COVID virus. So that is, in a nutshell, some of the things besides everyone walking around wearing a mask. Mm-hmm. There are some behind the scenes kind of things that maybe students won't see, but the purpose here was to assure the parents that this hard work and planning is going on and will be in place when we do start up in the fall. Well, mm-hmm. I guess next week, Wednesday the 26th.
Yes. Thank you. That's really helpful. I think the changing of the filters every 6 weeks, I was unaware of that. That's going to be fabulous, I think, not only for helping prevent the spread of the coronavirus, but all those other illnesses that come about throughout a school year. So thank you. I appreciate that. I forgot to introduce my co-host here, Sonia James, principal at Chico Elementary. So I want to introduce her as well, and she's going to ask the next question.
All right. Thank you, Becky. And I'd like to direct this question to Mr. Long, Ms. Hughes, and Mr. Pace. Each of you could respond to this because each of you are at various levels. Mr. Long, you're at the elementary, but you can kind of speak to both the lower and upper L. Ms. Hughes, speak to us about the middle schools, and Mr. Pace at high school. And the one question is, what will be different this year? When students arrive the first day of school, as they go through the halls, as they enter their classrooms, what will be different this year? Either of you can speak to that question.
Yeah, I'll kick things off, Sonia.
Thank you, Scott.
Good evening, everyone. Scott Long, principal at Doherty Elementary. Absolutely thrilled to be here tonight to share a little bit about what it's going to look like within the buildings. And Sonia, I think before I answer what's going to look different, I think a more important question to me is what's going to be the same. And that is going to be the love and support that our teachers provide kids every single day. They are so excited and pumped up to see your kids' faces, I'm excited to see your kids' faces. I'm excited to see you in the parking lot, and those relationships and commitment to supporting your kids emotionally, socially, and academically is going to be as strong as it was before we went on shutdown, and even stronger. So I want to just start with that. And then in terms of, what it's going to look different, what's going to look differently? I mean, a lot of things, and start with the classroom experience. All of our classrooms, most of our classrooms have pretty good sized spaces, and those that don't, we have these dividing walls that we can open up. So because we have fewer classrooms to run this year, our spaces are very larger than usual. And what you're going to notice is that kids are not going to be right next to each other. They're going to be spaced out in the classroom about 6 feet apart, and they're going to have their own workspace. And another unique thing is their supplies. So typically, like, supplies are like community supplies, kids are sharing. Kids are going to have their own supplies within the classroom. They are going to be asked to wear their mask throughout that 2-hour and 40-minute time period, which is definitely something that's going to be a challenge. I think one of the great things about, I'm pretty sure all the elementary buildings, is we all have exterior doors that go outside. So it's really easy for teachers to give kids a mask break, get them outside, space them out, let them breathe for a second, get them back in. That's not hard for us to do. So that's definitely going to be a significant difference within the classroom as well. Getting to school is going to be a big difference in terms of what the arrival and dismissal procedures look like. Typically, when kids get to our school and they get out of their cars or off the bus, they enter large common areas like the cafeteria or the multi-purpose rooms or the hallways. I know at Doherty we have a walking club. We used to have a walking club in the morning as kids arrived, and they would walk laps around the building. That obviously can't happen. And so, again, like I mentioned, we have exterior doors to all of our classrooms. Kids will be getting out of their cars, walking on a safe sidewalk area, and going directly to their teacher's exterior door, and their teacher will be greeting them at the door, and they'll enter into the classroom instead of going into those large common spaces. Similarly, dismissal, you think about if anyone's ever seen the innards of an elementary dismissal, again, you're looking at kids in large common areas, hallways, gyms, cafeterias lined up waiting to go, and you're not going to see that. You're going to see, we're primarily going to have all of our kids staged for dismissals outside, spaced out, with their masks on. And then in the event of inclement weather, we have some backup plans as well, some larger spaces that we can store kids. But so that's a significant difference as well. I think I touched on the biggest differences that we'll see. And I think there's this underlying difference that I think is on the forefront of all of our minds, and that's our kids as they come into us, their emotions, that hidden backpack of things that they may be feeling, things that they may have experienced or fears they may have experienced since we've been gone. And I think one of the things that I'm really excited about is every elementary building is prepared to run an opening event on the 26th to greet families and show them that, we're ready to support your kids, and kind of give them a good idea of what that's going to look like at each campus. So I think I covered the big differences.
You did a great job, and thank you for that. I'm glad you touched upon that hidden backpack, because we really, we see the visible one with the kids' physical things in it, but those emotional things that are in those backpacks that they will walk through the doors with. So that was a very good point. Ms. Hughes, at the middle level, what will be different? What will, or even as Mr. Long said, what will be the same as well?
Yeah, and thanks, Scott, for saying that, because I think one of the what we're most excited about is just having our kids back in the building. And although things will look back things will look differently in terms of procedural things, how we treat kids in the classroom, how we love kids in the classroom. Those things aren't going to change. So you said it perfectly. So I'm glad you kind of reminded me of that, because right now we're in the thick of just scheduling kids. And I think we forget about why are we doing this? We're doing this because we think that having kids in front of us and learning with a teacher in front of them, if that's something that families feel good about sending their kids to school, we're excited about having them. So just how we kind of got here, all 6th, 7th, and 8th graders in the district who elected to come to school in person will be attending school at Abbott this coming school year, which we're now referring to as West Bloomfield Middle School, because our Orchard Lake 7th and 8th graders are also coming to us this year. Because of the amount of middle school families that did elect to enroll their students in Lakers Online, the total number of students now attending in-person instruction as of today is 645 middle schoolers. That's less than the total number of students who attended Abbott last year. So that's kind of why we were combined the buildings. We could offer more support. Our teachers could be together. And we have less students this year than we did last year in middle school. So students will be either attending AM or PM, AM from 7:50 to 10:30 AM. The PM cohort will be 12 to 2:40 PM. There's approximately 325 students in each cohort. Cohorts went out yesterday and were based on multiple criteria, including siblings in other buildings, advanced math class, support classes, transportation, just to name a few. So while we are in this phase 4, students will be in learning families, where they'll be in one classroom, desks 6 feet apart, and wearing masks the entire time. So last year when students entered the building, they were allowed to kind of walk around the halls until the first bell rang. This year they're going to be coming right off their buses and going right to their classroom that we're going to send out all that information prior to the first day of school. Learning families are based on their math classes, and then core teaching teams will rotate into each classroom. So they may start with either an ELA, science, social studies, or a history class, and then every teacher will rotate into the classroom. So instead of students moving in the hallways, teachers are moving in the hallways. So students will be cohorted with the same group of students every single day. And based on the classroom size, some of our science labs, 6 feet apart, can hold up to 18 students. So our classes can be either anywhere from 12, and we have several that are 18, but that's just because we can hold that amount of students. Elective courses, so students, we're actually working on that as we speak. Elective courses will be taught opposite of when students are in school. So if I'm an AM cohort, I come to school in the morning. When I go home, I get my 2 electives in the afternoon. Those will be synchronous and asynchronous, so I'll be able to Zoom with my teacher live for both my electives. And if I am a PM cohort, my elective courses are in the morning. So that's quite different from last year. In terms of arrival and dismissal, we're going to have a lot of adults, multiple adults assigned at all of our entrances. We have a lot of entrances right off of Commerce Road, and then we have the where the buses drop off alongside the gym area. We have multiple entrances there too, and the adults directing students what entrances to go in, so that all students are going into one singular doorway. Students will go straight to their classrooms upon drop-off, and then when we dismiss, we'll do a staggered dismissal for students so that not all students are leaving to be picked up by parents at the same time or to be picked up by buses. So we're working on all those procedural things right now, but we just want to get kids in school. We can't wait for next Thursday when we're in person. Wednesday, the first day of school, is virtual. I know that seems kind of strange, but that Wednesday is a virtual day, so students will be getting onto their computers, and we'll have some tasks and some introductory things for them to do. So that's just a little bit different in the middle school this year, not a lot.
Not a lot. Well, thank you for that. It sounds good, and it sounds like you guys have a lot going on, and I am excited about the middle school combining, but I'm even more excited when I ride down the street of Orchard, when I ride down Orchard Lake Road and I see that their construction for the new middle school building, they're actually work in progress. So there's a lot to be excited about for our middle school. Mr. Pace, at the high school, talk to us about what will be different and what will be the same, just like our elementary and our middle schools.
Yeah, again, thanks for having me. And to echo what Amy and Scott said, it's nice to be reminded of why we do this and why we're putting in the work and why you all are here. And it's to support our kids and give them the best experiences that they can get. And that's something that'll be the same at West Bloomfield High School as it always has been. So we're going to be the most different probably than the other buildings. We had coming into this school year about 1,800 students, and we have some of the smaller classrooms in the interior of the building, and the largest class size is up to 36. So our Classroom to Cloud team developed multiple hybrid plans similar to what you heard for elementary and middle school. But in the end of that, we still couldn't find a way to safely meet the requirements in the return to learn plan from the governor and get our kids back in the building more than once a week. And so what we decided is we would rather make the decision to be virtual at the high school and do that really well. So we made that decision in late July and then have been focusing our time with our staff on how to best deliver virtual instruction. We're going to remain virtual until the governor moves us back into phase 5 in our region. And at that point, we'll come back to school full-time face-to-face. So while virtual, we are going to follow our block schedule. And if you're unfamiliar with that, it's a rotation of classes where students see 4 classes out of their 7 per each day. That'll run odd and even, alternating Monday and Tuesday, and then again Thursday, Friday. We'll follow the rest of the district with some learning tasks on Wednesday that aren't live, but will be posted for students to complete. At that time, we're going to deep clean our building, just as the other buildings do, and have some time for our teacher planning and some meetings and essential learnings that they need to do. But on the Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, our staff is going to be in the building working and hosting live class sessions each day. They'll have 3 sessions that are 50 minutes long, and then 1 that's a half hour long, but that half hour meets every one of those 4 days. After that, students and staff will take a half hour lunch. So that'll run from 9 to 12:30 for classes, and then 12:30 to 1 o'clock for lunch. After that, teachers will be back online from 1 o'clock to 2 o'clock for what we're calling a seminar period. This is going to be a drop-in opportunity for students to get live help from their teachers. It could be small group, individual, or just extended time as needed for students to ask questions to get that extra personalized attention that they might get when we're in person. Outside of that, our teacher workday starts at 8 a.m. and ends at 3 p.m. So there's also an hour built on both sides of that schedule for more individualized conference support. So that may be if a student needs to make something up or have extended individualized help, or a teacher may have some additional work or support they need to give that student or a small group of students, they can schedule that with them or their families during those times. So we really wanted to blend this with being something that mimics the live in-person experience for all students, but also provides some away from the screen time and personalized opportunities for help and individual attention. So outside of the live instruction time, students are also going to receive some what we call asynchronous work each day. And that may be reading, video clips to watch, things the teacher may have posted them to practice on individually or collaboratively, and then they'll come back to that teacher in the classroom virtually to go through those materials and then process their thinking together. Outside of that, some of the things that are going to be the same but maybe look different is at this point in time, we're still planning to offer all of our clubs and extracurriculars. Many of those may be virtual, but there's still going to be opportunities for students to be involved. We find that the social and emotional aspect of being involved outside of the academic side of the classroom is really important. We want to provide those opportunities for our students. Also, as of right now, all athletics except football are still running. We're waiting on guidance from the MHSAA about if we can have spectators or not, but at this point in time, those sports are still running outside of football, which has been delayed for decision. And then we're also looking at opportunities to get students in person for lab support or individualized support or emotional and counseling support in person in the building. So remember, we're not prohibiting students from being in the building. We just are limited in being able to bring so many students into the building at one time safely. So as we start to roll out our virtual learning, we're going to start to schedule in opportunities for students to be here in person as needed. So When we move to phase 5, whenever that is, per the governor's plan, hopefully sooner rather than later, we were going to return to a full in-person regular schedule at West Bloomfield High School. So outside of echoing what has already been said by the other panelists, we are really excited to see students again. It has been a long time, and I know all of us here and all of our staff, we do this because of the students. That's what drives us, and it is more than a welcoming situation for us to finally get to have them with us. So thank you.
You're welcome. Mr. Pace, could you just clarify for me when you said that if a student had needed to come into the building for something emotional or small, would they just schedule with their teacher? So if I had a kid at home that says, you know, I really feel I need to work in, I'd like to come and work in school, would that be possible for those students?
It's going to be possible, yes.
Okay.
So what we're doing right now is we're remaining virtual for the first couple weeks to nail down like the efficiency of that schedule and the routine of that schedule.
Mhm.
Counselors and our emotional and therapy support personnel, social workers are going to work to host groups or individual sessions with families in person right away as needed. And then we're going to start to build in scheduled opportunities to work with teachers for lab support or for, like you said, individualized emotional or academic support as necessary. So that'll be
That's
kind
awesome.
of coming as we get moving.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep.
Eric, I have a follow-up question, and maybe you addressed this and I was taking notes, I'm not sure. But did you talk about how attendance will be different from spring?
I did not, so thank you.
Okay, yeah, that might be an,
Yes. So I was looking at what was different between in-person instruction and remote instruction.
right.
One of our biggest differences, though, is going to be the difference between what remote instruction looked like in the spring from March to June and what it will look like now.
Mhm.
So last spring, we had basically a long weekend to adapt from in-person instruction to remote learning. And when we did that, we really tried to take into account the different situations families may be in and our teachers may be in with that quick adjustment. That, in coordination with the state, we had attendance that was really kind of secondary to the emotional well-being of students. It wasn't something that counted against them. Students couldn't necessarily fail a class based on lack of achievement or attendance. And, you know, at the end of the day, we didn't want to penalize any students for things that were outside of their control in the home or in the world. With better planning this time and more opportunity to nail down our processes, we want to mimic the in-person experience as best as possible. So we will be taking attendance at the live sessions, just as we would in the live classroom experience in the high school. And then grading will be based on the teacher's syllabus. So grading will be done in a way that grades your homework and your participation and your assessments, and will be a real grade that counts for you on your transcript. So a lot of that's going to be tied into attending classes on time and then turning your work in on time and seeking help as necessary based on your teacher feedback or your own personal understandings within the classroom. So really, we're looking at what you remember traditional school to be like in terms of grading and attendance. It just happens to be done through a computer screen. Whereas in the spring, it was a lot more work at your own pace. And we're going to try and make sure we're reaching out to everybody and give you the content as best as we can, but also support the fact that we had to make these adjustments in a very quick manner. But, you know, we understand that there have been some gaps that have been created in doing so. And I do think, though, that our district pivoted very well, and those gaps are probably smaller here than in many places, but they're still there. So we're going to work to address those, but we're also going to make sure that we up the rigor and the accountability for our staff and students.
Great, thank you for that clarification. So Claudia and Nikki, I'd like to ask a question of you guys. As parents, how do we support kids in their social interactions and teach new norms for those students who are returning to our brick and mortar learning? So what are some strategies maybe that parents can kind of talk to their kids about beforehand?
Thank you, Becky, for having us, or having me and Nikki. I'm excited to be here. I'm really excited to be back in the classroom or the school next week and seeing students. As it relates to your question, I think it's really important for us to remind parents and students that we need to get into the mindset that things have actually changed, right? It's like eating spaghetti squash and expecting it to taste like pasta. We need to get in the mindset that things are going to be different, and that's absolutely okay. So supporting students in their social interactions, really kind of reminding them that physical distancing is what's going to keep us safe, and reminding them to do things like practice wearing a mask, and wearing it the appropriate way. Utilizing the opportunity for students to visit the school on Wednesday, the 26th, to see their classrooms, to see the X's on the floor, to see where the physical distancing marks are throughout the school will be helpful for students. Reminding them that classroom safety is important. And having conversations about what they learned at school about like hand washing and wearing your mask appropriately is also really important in addressing the safety of students. Socially, just reminding kids that absolutely, you miss your friends. We all miss your friends and your teachers. I always think about things like encouraging students to do some sort of verbal greeting as opposed to a handshake or a hug. I know that's really challenging for some. But maybe making up like a cool like head nod or having a fun code word would allow kids to physically distance safely, but also appropriately engage their peers. And then encouraging kids to create, like opportunities to practice with their peer group. So that they're mastering how to physically distance, but also socially engage their peers. Unfortunately, they're not going to have a whole lot of downtime within the classroom instructional period to really kind of play during like recesses and things like that, but they still will have the opportunity to communicate with their peers from a physically appropriately distanced area.
I love the spaghetti squash and spaghetti analogy, because that's kind of what we're going for. It's not going to be exactly the same, but the essence is still there. It is still spaghetti. Okay, great. I love that. Nikki, did you have anything else to add?
Sure. Thanks, Claudia. You did a good job. Nikki Warren, I'm a school psychologist in the district. So I did want to clarify, just based on what Claudia said, the meet and greet on the 26th is for elementary students only. So our elementary students will be able to go in and see that. Unfortunately, middle school will not, and the high school is not going in general. But it was important for elementary school students to go in and see it. And I think also, like what you said, Becky, just having the conversations with your kids about what they can expect and how look different, reminding them those things, the mask, the social distance, and talking about it really in advance. It's not going to be exactly the same. It's going to be very important. And some of the things you talked about also was, you might not be able to interact with your friends in the same way, but we can come up with creative other ways to do so. We had talked about, well, they won't have us at school, but at home, doing things like shadow tag, where you step on their shadow instead of tagging the student directly, or rock, paper, scissors that you can play without touching each other. That it might look different, but it doesn't mean that it's not going to exist at all.
Great. Thanks. I love shadow tag. That's a great idea.
Awesome. Thank you, both Nikki and Claudia. The next question is directed to Diane Swadish. Diane is the Director of Special Services and Support Services. Diane, what will special education services look like come next week? How are we going to meet the needs of our students with special needs?
Hi, Sonia. Thank you so much for having me tonight. I am Diane Swadish. I'm the Director of Student Support Services, and happy to be here to talk a little bit about what our services for our students with IEPs will look like here in the district as we go back to school in phase 4. I did ask Becky to create a slide just because we are special in special education, and it tends to be a little more complicated. So I thought it would help if I had a visual as I talked through what our plans are for our students with IEPs. So as you can see, we have various different plans depending on the age of the students and what program the students receive services. Currently, our plans for our students in our early childhood special education program, otherwise known as ECSC, which is located at Scotch Elementary. Those students are being offered a face-to-face AM session, which will run from 8 a.m. to 10:30 a.m. 4 days a week, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. And then for those students who will not be coming back face-to-face, there will be a similar session offered in the afternoon, and that would be from 12 until 2:30. Again, 4 days a week, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. My teachers in the early childhood special education program, I believe, have spoken to all of their parents, and we have schedules worked out for all of those students in that program. So during phase 4, that's what our services are looking like for the students in the ECSE program. And then once we go back to phase 5, they will revert back to their regular schedule, which we would run normally. For our students in our categorical programs, which would be our pre-K through 12 programs for students with autism, for students with cognitive impairments, our EI program, and our K-5 level classrooms, which are actually located throughout the district. We have classrooms at every building in our district for those students. We are offering 4 full days of services. We really felt, as we looked at those students and talked about the needs of those students with IEPs in those programs, that it was imperative to bring those students back to full face-to-face services, given the level of needs that those students have in that program, knowing that for them, learning face-to-face and being with our teachers is of utmost importance, just because oftentimes remote learning has not been successful for them, and knowing that we wanted to have them back with us in the buildings to be able to provide the most services that we could for them. So right now they're scheduled again for 4 full days, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday. And we've worked with our staff in those programs and had multiple conversations about what that's going to look like. Most of those programs have very small numbers to start with, not having more than 12 already on the caseloads of those teachers, and many of them are much smaller than that with high staff ratios, so a teacher and often multiple paraprofessionals to be able to support those students. And then we also have parents in some of those programs who have, expressed concern with their children coming back to school. So we are prepared to offer virtual services to those families in those programs who, are not comfortable sending their students back. And we have moved several teachers to being able to provide virtual services to our students in our categorical classrooms as well. So if you're a parent of a student in one of those programs and you're not sure whether or not coming back to school full-time is right for your child for whatever reason, please feel free to either reach out to your child's teacher, or you can reach out directly to myself or my supervisor, Kim Szynski. For our students in our buildings, our K-8 buildings, who would receive services such as resource room or speech and language and are attending the hybrid schedule, those teams in those buildings will work together to determine in which ways they will be able to continue to deliver services to our students. We've met this week with all of our teams. We have a couple more teams to meet with on Thursday and Friday, but Kim and I have spent this week meeting with our teams and talking about looking at schedules and at what times we could deliver resource room services to students, knowing they're here for a shortened amount of times, and whether or not we would be looking at providing in-person services or virtual services or a combination of both in order to continue to support our students as they're here on a hybrid schedule. And then for our 9-12 students who are here on getting the virtual services, as Mr. Pace talked about earlier, they'll continue to receive virtual resource room services just as the rest of the high school students would, because the resource room classes are part of the high school schedule. At our transition center, they'll again also run for 4 full days, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, and the staff at the transition center have been planning with Ms. Szynski and working to bring those students back. So they're pretty excited to get those students back in the program, and anxiously awaiting to, be working with students again face to face, and also making plans for students who are going to be virtual in that program. Our Project Search program, which runs out of Henry Ford Hospital in West Bloomfield, is going to follow its regular schedule. We've been planning with the Henry Ford West Bloomfield site since early June as to whether or not we could continue to operate that program, and working with them throughout the summer. And so we are ready to implement that Project Search program, and the interns are ready to go, and our teacher is ready to go. So we're excited to be able to offer that program again on its regular schedule. during phase 4 or phase 5. If we go back to phase 3 in our virtual, then it will go back, it will follow that as well. And then in the district, pre-K through 12 students who receive speech and language services only, those school services may be delivered in person at school or virtually via Zoom, just depending on how the speech and language pathologist can schedule that for the students. So all of those schedules are going to be worked on, over the next couple weeks as we get students back to school in front of us. We know that kids are going to come back and, look a little bit different than when they left us as far as where their skill set might be. And so our staff are anxious to be able to see their students and work with them and be able to determine, at what level they're going to continue to work going forward in this school year.
Thank you, Diane. It's some great work being done. And thank you for all the work that you guys have put into just helping meet the needs of all of our kids, because I know one thing for many of our kids in the programs, the structure and the routine are important. So thank you for the work that in the structure you have put in for our students. Becky?
Thanks, Sonia.
Mhm.
So Nikki and Lynn, how can parents and guardians support kids who are worried about being sick? And like I said, I didn't even know that my 10-year-old had thoughts and worries about that. And so what are some things that parents can do at home to help their students ease that concern as they come back to school?
Excellent question, Becky, and thank you for having me. My name is Lynn, and I am the school mental health specialist. So I think it's important to remember that anxiety is a natural response to threats in the environment, and it can be adaptive if it helps us engage in behaviors that keep us safe. So for example, worries about the virus may help us remember to wash our hands. And so it's really important to validate that anxiety about something like a virus is a natural response to a threat in the environment. So that validation of your kids' feelings is going to be really important. And validation at its core is just conveying that their feelings are okay to have and that they make sense based on their experience. So supporting your kids can look like active listening, right? I know we're all on our phone these days, but putting down the phone and making sure you're listening, asking questions, and conveying verbally that their feelings are okay to be having. And when kids have gaps in their knowledge, it's kind of like we imagine the monster in the closet. If we don't see what's in it, we'll fill it with whatever we can picture. And so it's really important to ask open-ended questions about what they know and understand. And there's this thing in sales called the reflexive no, where people will automatically say no. So if you say, do you have any questions? The automatic response is usually no, especially from teenagers. And so instead of saying, do you have any questions, you might change the way you say it and say, what questions do you have? And that gives them the opportunity to start thinking about it. And taking the opportunity to really look at resources with them and say, okay, we want to understand more about this virus. Let's look together at the CDC website. Let's look at all of these sources that tell us how to protect ourselves. So I think making sure that they have the correct information will help support their feelings of, their worries and kind of correct any worries that would interfere with their functioning or make them scared to even be outside, right? If they have the facts, then they'll understand the risk level that's associated with all of those different activities.
Thanks, Lynn. Nikki, did you have anything else you wanted to add?
Yes, so the other thing that we had talked about was making sure that we would talk to kids about what they can do to keep themselves from being sick. So obviously what we know so far is, washing your hands and how to wash them well, the 20 seconds. I know there's lots of songs being taught to wash your hands for that long. I know Happy Birthday is one of them, probably one of the easier ones for our younger kids, because we know that they all know that. Older kids, I've heard it to a bunch of different songs, so I'm sure that they know it too. And then also the masks. And so I think it's really important that we start practicing that with all of our kids. We probably also have to practice it for ourselves. I know I haven't yet worn a mask for 3 hours, which is going to be the requirement. For staff, it'll be longer, but for students every day. So making sure that we're really talking to our kids about that, kind of like when you start the school year, usually, you start to wake your kids up earlier every day, a little bit before as summer comes to an end, so that they slowly get back on that school schedule. we kind of want to do the same thing with wearing masks. We want to make sure that it's being paired to with like favorable activities. You know, if you say to your kid, we're going to practice wearing a mask, sit here, wear this mask, every second is going to feel, you know, painful and long. Pair it with things that they enjoy, it might go a little bit faster for them. You know, you're going to watch TV, why don't you just wear your mask while you watch TV, and the time will go by faster. You know, doing family game nights, we're all going to wear our masks together while we play games, things like that, because it really is going to be a big change for all of us to have to wear them for that long. Most of us have not had to do that quite yet.
That's a good idea. I have seen online some parents asking their child to wear the mask while they use the iPad or TV. Again, it maybe just kind of like, you know, they might forget about it and you wore it for 25 minutes. That's great. Or, oh my gosh, you wore it for an hour, until they get used to it. And Lynn, I love what you, go ahead, Nikki, you were going to say something?
I think that's important too, but you're saying, Becky, to build up to it. Like, we're not going to expect anyone to wear it for 2.5 hours right away. So maybe the expectation is 10 minutes today, 15 minutes tomorrow, and build up to that. I know we're down to a week, so I might have to pick it up.
Tighten that schedule up a little bit. But Lynn, I like what you said too about having a healthy amount of anxiety around something, and that's actually what keeps us safe. That's a different, for me as a parent, that's a different way to look at, you know, like why my kids need to wear helmets and things like that. So yeah, okay.
And just to add really quickly, you know, that anxiety only becomes an issue when it interferes with our functioning to the level where like we can't go to the grocery store because our anxiety is so high. So it can be healthy and it can also be unhealthy depending on how it is.
Thank you.
Yeah, and Nikki, I'm going to go back to the practicing with the mask. When you said that, I likened it to building that reading stamina. You have to build that stamina to keeping the mask on for longer periods of time, which kids are not accustomed to. So if parents haven't started, now is a great time to start practicing and doing some of the things that you said. You know, there's so much that's happened during this period since March when we left school to now that we're really literally a week away from opening our doors for kids again. And Claudia and Joe, how might parents support students who are grieving? Some may be grieving the loss of a family member, some of the activities that they are not able to engage in, routines, and some of those things that really have impacted our students emotionally. How might families support our students as they prepare to return to school?
Hi everyone, I'm Joanne Vejanovich, counselor at the middle school, but also been at the, counselor at the high school, but also been at the, I know I'm trying to go back with Amy Hughes. And so I just first want to say how honored I am to be asked to be on this committee and feel, you know, you are among such great educators and great staff even around here, and how excited we are for you guys to be back from there. The second thing I wanted to say before kind of addressing the question is there's been a lot of change for everyone. So you've been parenting a lot probably in survival mode and kind of rolling with the punches and kind of all the different things that change. There's been a lot of activity and change for you guys too. And you guys are doing a great job, and you need to know that too, because I'm sure there's been days where you have been also overwhelmed and having a hard time with that too. Going on with also how kids are kind of feeling too, you know, think about this as a grieving, like as, you know, you could have lost a loved one, but also since it's such change of not being able to have a proper graduation or like a 5th grade promotion, not being able to play, you know, football. Right now I have a lot of athletes that are really upset and having a hard time adjusting to that. That can look different in a lot of different ways. So just kind of even knowing those signs. Going back to like how you look at the 5 stages of grief, where there could be anger and bargaining, denial and depression, and then finally some acceptance, and kind of letting your, you know, student kind of experience that in a healthy kind of way too. One of the tips I always have given some of my students too, especially when they're having a hard time kind of getting over it, is let them have 15 minutes to vent and complain and be upset about this, cry, do whatever they need to do, and then try to move on with your day. And as I said, just acknowledging that you know it is not unfair, and we understand that, and we're kind of going to be moving on from there. I think a lot of even what Scott said earlier too is the emotional backpack too. we haven't seen your kids in a long time, and we've tried to keep in touch and everything else. So, if there has been a problem, or like, someone has lost, a family member, it doesn't necessarily have to be with COVID, because even if you lost another family member for another reason, it still looked a lot different than probably what it would have been. It's also just kind of even letting their staff know that too. So we know, there could be some other times where they could be acting out, or, could be experiencing some different things too. And I think also this has a little bit, you know your child, and each child's also a little bit different per se. For example, my brother, he's an exploder. And, if he was upset about something, he explodes, and then he is completely fine. Like, it is out of his system. Where I kind of internalize it, and I would be like, really trying to have a hard time for a little while, where it takes me a little bit longer to get over stuff. So just knowing what your child is kind of like, and, just kind of meeting them where they need to. So they need a little space. They need, a little bit more of distraction. They need more check-in, just kind of knowing that too. And that just knowing that, we know it's going to be different, but, different isn't always necessarily horrible or bad. It's just going to be different, as in, like, we won't have football season, but you want to know what does spring football season kind of look like? Activities, once again, may not be, the ideal thing where they're doing a lot of stuff with your friends, but maybe you started doing some more family time and doing a game night. So, like, as I said, it's kind of looking different from there. So, you guys are doing a great job. Keep it up. As I said, I know it's going to be exciting for the kids and a little nerve-wracking for everyone too, but just know you got this.
Claudia, do you have anything you'd like to share with that as well?
Absolutely. To echo what was just said and what was said in previous questions, I do think it's important for us to recognize that giving children and students the opportunity, the time and space to voice their concerns is really helpful. So identifying a time maybe throughout the day where you can sit and ask questions and validate feelings, and have your student really feel as if they're being heard is critically important to them processing feelings associated with grief. As it relates to the graphic that's on the slide right now, I'd like to address that this would be perfectly appropriate for adults and smaller children, as in addition to teens, right? So we all know that we have some people that we may encounter that may exhibit behaviors that are maybe a little jarring, and we don't really understand why. It's important for us to recognize that behaviors that we see, the crying, the complaining, the sneaking around, the fighting or leaving, the disrespect, or just blatantly ignoring things, that comes from someplace. So all those behaviors are associated with feelings, and it may be fear, it may be nervousness about returning to school, it may be associated with the you had the opportunity to letter in a sport and you might not be able to play that sport this year, or college scholarships and all those sorts of things. So know that challenging behaviors, they come from someplace. And it's important for us to give time and space and to validate those feelings when students and children are ready to chat and talk. I do also think it's appropriate for us to mention that it's developmentally appropriate for all kids to have excessive screen time and to refuse to do things and to complain. We all did it, and they do it too. So recognizing that when things become out of character for your student or your child, that's when you want to start kind of addressing what they may be feeling, and associating behaviors with feelings is really important. That helps build that feelings vocabulary for kids so that they feel more comfortable addressing adults and people that they trust with how they're feeling. I think just as kind of like a wrap up for this, utilizing things like books and journaling and those sorts of things are also really helpful for kids just kind of addressing grief. There's lots of resources online, and anyone at any of your schools would be more than willing to get you in contact with somebody that would be able to help address those sorts of circumstances.
All right, thank you. That journaling is a great idea also. Yeah, Becky?
Yeah, so Claudia and Nikki, how can we support kids in their online learning? So we know we may have some parents here who are Laker online parents, or possibly some high school parents. So what are some things that parents can do online to make their like first day of school a success and all of those things with online learning?
So one of the things I think parents can do is definitely something that still makes their first day of school special. You know, we talked about how we really need to make the divide between summer and school starting something to be celebrated, and so that that transition is really like marked for everyone, so that it's no longer, you know, our summer schedule. You know, still buying, we talked about like new clothes or taking pictures on the first day of school, those kinds of things. And I think the biggest thing really for the online learning is going to be setting a routine, making sure that, you know, you're still doing that morning routine in your house. We're still getting dressed before we do school in the morning. I know that's going to be a hard one for a lot of our kids, especially our high schoolers, but we got to really, you know, dress the part, making sure there's a spot that we're in our house that we are doing the online learning. It's, you know, we're not online learning from our beds. I know we have some examples throughout the district of what those spaces looked like at home. So it definitely can be, you know, your own in a unique space, but doing work, you know, in pajamas in your bed is a different situation than getting up every day and going to a workspace and getting ready to learn. And then Claudia, I think you had.
Yeah, so I do think it's really important for us to, like Nikki said, set a schedule, make sure that there are clear, concise expectations for your student. Doing things like creating a social contract, doing morning meetings that kids are used to, right? Allow your student to teach you what the beginning of a school day looks like and help them kind of get into a routine of setting up their day. Not only will that give them some control of their day, which helps them build autonomy and independence, but it also allows them to link the behaviors that happen at school with behaviors that would typically happen at home, so that transition is easier. So morning meetings and contracts, sharing good things is always a great idea. That's a good, you know, jump start for the day. It keeps people positive, and helps you look forward to something throughout your day. I would also recommend, you know, rewarding positives and successes, and then talking about the challenges, instead of just ignoring them or not addressing them or switching up the routine to help alleviate what the problem is. So I know that I enjoy working out when I know that I can eat a cookie at the end of the day, right? Like the reward is what I'm looking forward to. So maybe having your child help you create some sort of reward-based system for getting through their online learning is really helpful, and that really reinforces that positive behavior. And then just addressing like, you know, that was not a great thing that happened today. We were all off. Nobody got dressed. We need to kind of address that and communicate that with your student. And then just practicing, right? So practice getting up and having a breakfast and getting dressed and starting your day, and making sure that everybody's clear and in that routine as we transition throughout the school year.
Great. Awesome. Thank you, ladies. And Claudia, I love your food analogies. The spaghetti. And now
Really motivated.
yes, you're driven by food. So good. You know, and sometimes, you know, we will find that kids will experience some difficulties in their new learning environments. What might families be on the lookout for if their child is struggling with virtual learning, the new learning environment in school, the routines that are different for them each day? Lynn, Joe, what might families be on the lookout for? And then if their child may be experiencing some signs of depression or withdrawal, how do we support families with that? Or how do families support their kids with that?
Great question. So what you want to look for is really a major change in behavior from what your student normally experiences or does. And this is different for every kid. So you know your student best, and so you will be the best judge of, you know, if there's a major change. So the main categories that would indicate depression or anxiety are major changes in eating habits, major changes in sleeping, isolation from others, which COVID complicates, right? Changes in activity levels and enjoyment of preferred activities. So if your kid really loves coloring and all of a sudden they're really not into coloring and they're oversleeping and they're maybe eating less than they normally do, that might be, you know, a little flag to look into that and ask some more questions or get some extra support. Some of these things might be harder to identify with COVID. I mean, we're all physically distancing from each other, so isolation can be difficult to determine. And enjoyment of things we previously used to like to do. If we used to love to go to the movies and we can't go to the movies anymore, then it can be kind of hard to tell. And so just being aware and kind of being observant, I think, is going to be important, and just looking out for those major behavioral changes.
Thank you. Coach Joe, you're muted. I'm mute. There we go.
Oh, sorry about that.
That's okay.
I also think that also like a schedule and making sure the kids are kind of following a schedule. So, also kids are going to be kids. They may not always love to go to school and do all this stuff. So, a lot of times they might say, oh, I'm done, or I haven't done anything. But if they haven't been checking in, still looking on Power School to see how their progress is kind of going, for that, asking questions about what they're learning so that you kind of keying into that too. And I always kind of, had a harder time with, sometimes the depression, because I don't, a lot of kids that are in middle school and high school, it doesn't seem like, they're a kid that you kind of grew up with. That's also some normal behaviors that the kids might be a little bit more withdrawn, or they might be, sleeping a little bit more because they're growing. So kind of anything out of the ordinary too is always a great time. Also, if they're spending too much time on the computer, making sure you're kind of putting in breaks, kind of seeing what they're doing too. Is it schoolwork? Are they stuck on something? What is the problem that they're having? And then you always can reach out to the teacher, or, the counselor, or, a social worker, if it's in the elementary buildings, that, if you're having other problems with that. Making sure that they're safe, doing stuff safely on the internet too. And then you're really focusing on getting out and trying to do like those extracurricular activities to really kind of help with that routine. So, if in the morning, if you have an early riser and they want to, get out for a little bit of, air before, getting onto their routine, or, in the high school, if you guys are done it pretty much by 12:30ish, if you do that. So doing the exercise that they might need from there.
Thank you. Those are all great suggestions. And I know that it is difficult for many of our families, and it's good to know that within our district, we have such resources with regards to our staff, our professional staffs that will be here to help parents or help them navigate this. So thank you guys.
Mm-hmm. Sonia, I was going to say the same exact thing, that if you do notice those extreme changes in your teen, middle schooler, or even elementary student, we have people on staff who are ready and willing to help. So thank you, Sonia. All right, so our last question this evening is directed to Nikki and Lynn. And this is more about the parents, and Joe, you talked about this earlier. How can parents take care of their own mental health? Many are working, as well as trying to make sure their students are, safe, whether they're learning online at home, or whether they're going to a half day, or even if they're not working. I mean, being home with kids is a job in itself. So what can our parents do to make sure that they're healthy so that they're able to support their students?
I can take on the first answer. So I think it's important to remember that all of these signs that we've talked about, you can look for in yourself. So as a parent, if you notice that you're sleeping a lot more, that you're feeling like you don't enjoy things, that you're feeling kind of down, all of those things are indicators as well that maybe it's time to make space for recharging your own batteries. And I know that that's an impossible ask sometimes, and especially nowadays when our time is monopolized and when kids are at home more and all of that. But it doesn't have to be big, and it doesn't have to be expensive. So, and you can even include your kids in it. Like if there's an activity that you really love, like for me, that's gardening. You can include kids in that, and that can be a really restorative activity and help keep your kids occupied. So there's no reason why you can't multitask in that regard. And this is hard for everyone. We're all doing this for the very first time. So, it's important to be gentle with yourself and remember that it's okay to not be okay, and it's okay to ask for help. So, reaching out to your school team for resources. We're all trying to figure this out together. So I'd encourage asking for help if you need it.
And then we also just want to remind parents too that you can't pour from an empty cup. So it's really important to take care of those self-care strategies, for yourself, things that help you feel better, whether it is stepping away, from some of that like joint teacher parent role that's going on for a little bit, and doing things for yourself. It's okay. We also want to reiterate too that we want to make sure that everyone is just giving themselves grace and recognizing that things are not the same as they are before. And every one of us is doing the best that we can, parents included. And no one's done this before. We've never, had to parent through a pandemic and work from home and watch our kids at the same time and all of that stuff. And so it's really just important that everyone is just doing what's best for their own family. And that might not be the same thing that's the best for your neighbor's family or your sister's family or your aunt's family or whatever that may be. The only thing, we can do right now that's what's in our control is doing what's right for our own family. And, taking that on is that's okay. And that's enough for right now.
Yeah, Nikki, I think that is a great point to end on, is that we are doing and making decisions that are best for our family and best for our students, which Coach Joe alluded to earlier. So yeah, that's a great point to end on. I want to thank all the panelists for coming this evening. We appreciate your time. We know that everyone has been extremely busy. Families, parents, guardians who are here tonight, we also appreciate your time. And again, I want to refer back to what Mr. Long said. We can't wait to see our kids next week. We're super excited. Everybody's working overtime to get everything ready and make sure that the kids are welcomed back in with air high fives and big smiles behind our masks. So we can't wait to see everyone. Before we go, I would like to share parent resource sheet that was put together by our wonderful Jennifer Graham. This presentation, this question was asked, will be emailed to parents. But if you click on this link, it has conversations about COVID-19 and a number of resources, videos that support the conversation, and our WBSD Return to Learn plan that you can have for your reference. This is a great resource. So if you are looking for some more information, that is there for you. And as we said earlier, please reach out to your school's principal if you're not sure who the social worker is or who your child's counselor is. We have had a lot of staffing changes. I believe this is as up to date as I could get it today. So, you can see your child's school. We do not have the West Bloomfield counselors divvied up by alphabet at this time. However, if you reach out to anyone, they will put you in contact with the right person. And you can see we have 3 Lakers online support staff there. We have Stacy Lusky as a social worker. Susan Chang is a counselor, as well as Lisa Tompkins. So those are 3 new positions with our new Lakers Online. So again, this will be emailed. We thank you all for coming. We can't wait to see and wave to you in the parking lot next week as your kids come into us. And we hope you all have a great night. Thank you so much.